Las Casas had conceived another mission which would not the less delight his self-esteem, his zeal, and his devotion, nor dull the echo of his name. He dreamed of being the mediator of Napoleon in Europe, arriving from the accursed island and enjoying a reputation which would prove his disinterestedness, the nobility of his conduct, and the integrity of his character. He would bear the banished man's complaints to the thrones of kings. He would arouse the feeling of the people. He would obtain a mitigation of the captivity. He would prove that the health of the emperor was being undermined by the stay in St. Helena, and that at least a change in the place of exile was necessary. So fixed was his determination that on the first day of his arrest, he set himself in personal opposition to the emperor in trying to have the manuscript of his journal sent to him, while the emperor, for his part, claimed it as belonging to him. Without inquiring whether his retention of the manuscript was agreeable to the emperor or not, he took upon himself to send Hudson Lowe a request in which he created himself advocate, an arbitrator for Napoleon. But actually all he did was to dig a trench and raise a barrier in the face of such documents so closely resembling literature, in which he gave so little thought to consequences. One can only ask oneself whether Las Casas, having constantly another public in view, if posterity was his aim, did not, as the English agent said, arouse the emperor to written protests, to manifestation of every kind, which would add something to the story and something spicy to the book he was preparing. Nothing could affect his continued stay on St. Helena, seeing that, as he said, he had been disgraced by arrest. In vain did the Grand Marshal write to him and tell him that the emperor desired him to stay. In vain did Hudson Lowe suggest his return to Longwood, provided he acquiesced to the orders in writing. Lowe, out of regard for the emperor's convenience, thus agreed to shut his eyes to the most serious possible infraction of rules. He sent an account of it to the minister, who, by return of messenger, approved this indulgence. But Las Casas had no intention of returning to the emperor, and with most flowery oratory, he published his decision, an irrevocable one. The emperor palliated his departure by sending him a letter containing a decided approval. Your conduct at St. Helena, he wrote, has, like your life, been honorable and irreproachable. Your company has been indispensable to me. You alone can read, speak, and understand English. Nevertheless, I advise you, and at a pinch, I order you to request the commander of this island to send you to the continent. He cannot refuse, since he has no authority over you. You have voluntarily decided upon this step. And he finished thus his letter, in which he had amassed all the most violent curses against the governor. Be comforted and console my friends. It is true that my body is a prey to the hatred of my enemies. They omit nothing that may gratify their desire for revenge. They are killing me inch by inch, but Providence is too just to allow this to go on for long. The unhealthiness of this pestilential climate, the lack of all that makes life worth living, will, I'm sure, soon put an end to this existence, the last moments of which will be an act of disgrace on the English character in Europe, will one day point with horror to this wicked and cunning man whom true Britons will disown as an Englishman. Las Casas therefore departed with the honors of war. The emperor appeared to have forgotten having disapproved of his hastiness, but seemed to admit what he had told Las Casas. He will be more useful in Europe than at Longwood. If his departure aroused surprise, especially after the declaration he had made on April 20th, 1816, in which he asserted his devotion and his desire to live with the Emperor Napoleon, he had to find an excuse to explain everything: the necessity of making public the state of the emperor's health and the revulsion which such a disclosure would have on public opinion. Since the governor had, upon orders from his superior, restricted the boundaries of the enclosure mapped out by Admiral Cockburn for the emperor's exercise, since he had endeavored to increase the sentries, even ruminating upon an unbroken iron fence up to the Longwood Gardens, Napoleon had ceased to take the exercise which had up until then been indispensable to his health. He had more frequently taken his meal at odd hours. He had, in prolonged baths, sought relief from the pains which first made their appearance at the beginning of 1816, and the increase of which had been rapid. The doctor who should have attended him in the place of the French doctor, who had refused to accompany him, received only summary instructions and was mean-spirited. He had not offered his services during the regime of Admiral Cockburn, but upon the arrival of Hudson Lowe, he was introduced to him and sent him reports about the Emperor and his companions, which were not those of a doctor, nor even of a subordinate officer, but of a spy. He ridiculed those with whom the Emperor lived and did not even spare the ladies, imagining that the more aggressive he was, the more ingratiating he was. He spared no one, either in his correspondence with the governor or that which he had with the ministry's knowledge, with a certain Mr. Finlayson, clerk to the Admiralty, who never failed to show these letters to those in authority, and so Mira did more than anyone to create around the prisoners an atmosphere of mistrust which was particularly unfavorable to them. Lowe, however, did not allow himself to be deceived by his cunning. He had brought from England, with the title of Inspector of Hospitals on St. Helena, a certain Dr. Baxter, his surgeon of the Corsican Rangers, who was entirely in his confidence. His intention was to allot him to the Emperor, if not as an ordinary doctor, at least as a consultant, so as to prevent Napoleon's health from becoming an excuse for meliorations prejudicial to his safe custody. As soon as he mentioned Baxter to the Emperor, the latter flew into a rage, but Lowe bided his time and was only waiting an opportunity of showing Amira that he thought little of him, had no confidence in him. That opportunity presented itself all the more timely since Amira was thoughtless and indiscreet, was easily offended, foolishly vain, and intended his mission to the Emperor to be a means of effecting a promotion and an increase in salary. Sharply taken to task by Lowe, he turned towards the Emperor, from whom he had great hopes, either monetary, for Napoleon had the reputation for possessing inexhaustible wealth, or professionally, since he would be master of him. He foresaw, for he was no fool, what was to be got out of him, and he forthwith offered him his services.